I like to say everywhere I go that we're the original data scientists. Us who work in the subsurface resource industry, we're the original data scientists. And the way I back it up is I think about Danny Krieg. Danny Krieg had that difficult problem of deep, hot, very high pressure, difficult gold mines in South Africa. He had to figure out where should they mine? Where can they maximize the gold grade? So it was a fundamental problem of in space with sparse data, how do I predict the gold grade away from where I know it? And so he developed a whole set of practical statistical engineering tools to do that, and with the geosciences. And then Matheron came along afterwards, and so this is 1950s, 1960s. And guess what, if you think about it, data-driven approaches to support engineering decision-making, that's data science. That's data science. And you know, I wrote a book, it's called Geostatistical Reservoir Modeling. If I could go back in time, I'd rename it. It'd be called Spatial Data Analytics. Maybe it'd be even more popular now. So I left industry 7 years ago, not because I did not love my time in industry. I left to give back. I left to teach students. And so what I found out was many times I'd encounter intellectual hurdles in what I taught, and I'd see that students struggle. Every time they struggled, the solution was write more code, build a demonstration, build an interactive dashboard. And so I start making all this content. And I'm giving it away to the students, and I saw I had two choices. I could be the professor who gets students to be like, okay, don't share my content. Nobody can share my content, it's mine. Mine, like kind of like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, it's my precious, you know? Yeah. Or I could follow the example of my PhD advisor. And my PhD advisor, Clayton Deutsch, developed some of the early open source geostatistical software. And that software is at the heart of many of the applications you see today. Yes. And what happens is when you give away, it all comes back to you. And so there's some really fundamental, there's some really interesting things that have happened. And let me just, so people understand what I'm talking about here. I mean 3 full courses on YouTube, 2 additional supplementary short courses, hundreds and hundreds of well-documented workflows in Python, synthetic data that's realistic, interactive dashboards. Like it's a lot of work, right? But what's happened is people from all over industry are using this content. And they're learning and they're growing, and a lot of wonderful things have happened. I've been in meetings with teams in Midland, and I've said, hey, can we talk about my research? And they're like, we use your content, we follow you, we see what you're doing. Let's talk about funding your students. Like, I hope you can understand as a professor, that's an absolute dream to hear that. And so I found many opportunities to get funding for my students, to support my students. I found many opportunities. Can I tell you one more thing? I get in arguments right before the class with German professors. I don't know why, it's always German professors. I'm making a joke right now. There's actually a couple of really cool German professors who are my friends. And they'll look through it and they'll be like, I disagree with this assumption. So what happens when you give your content away? You get peer review from the entire world, resulting in better content. And so it's actually been such a great journey. Right? It's actually a really cool thing to do. What I tried to say in the talk today, and I think it's really important, is I didn't just say that we're the original data scientists to just brag and be done with it. I said that we are the original data scientists and we have tools and knowledge that can be used right now to improve the application of AI within energy. So in other words, we are well prepared to move into the future with these technologies. And so I gave really simple examples. I talked about data biasing, I talked about building uncertainty models, things that are critical to us and we know about how to correct biases, and we know how to build uncertainty models. I am at my heart a statistician. And I always remember, I'm going to probably cause you to kind of go back to Stats 101, and I hope it was a good memory for you. But the idea of the degrees of freedom, it was the number of pieces of information you have minus the number of assumptions. Okay, so now imagine you have, and my students do this from time to time, if you have 50 data, don't build a 10,000 parameter model. Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, we always have to scale our models for the size of our problem. And if you have a simpler model, you can understand your model. And what I learned from my time in industry, if people can't understand your model, they won't use it. And so for me, it's always about deploying and adding value. So, and I think you've already hit on it, and that's the problem of education. We always must be competent engineers and geoscientists in everything we do. We never get to claim, we can't claim black box. And so we need to understand every model we use. So we do need to have a fundamental understanding. And that understanding, in my machine learning course, I spend 2 months explaining probability, Monte Carlo Markov chains, all the various kind of issues around feature engineering before I get to even building the most simple machine learning model. So we need to have that foundation so that we can be competent in the practice. The other challenge I think going forward is this, and we know this problem, software. And what it comes down to is I've seen what happens when we have development within energy companies. How do you manage the repositories, the sharing of the code? How do you ensure that you have quality and checking and so forth? I think we could find ourselves in the Wild West again. Just like in the days where people used to have their Excel spreadsheets that everybody would just share. They would just share the spreadsheets around and put their macros in with their VBA. But we need to be thinking, how do we have code quality and quality assurance and continuous integration and so forth. One last thing I'd like to say is that it's just such a pleasure being here. The SPE Gulf Coast section has a special place in my heart because early in my career, it was a great opportunity for me to gain professional experience, networking, and so forth. But as an early professor, and now, there's so many great things. Actually, you all gave me a data science award just a couple of years ago, and I do appreciate that. It's been very helpful in helping me establish my program, network, and engage with companies. And it's all about getting support for my students. So thank you so much for your support.